Welcome to the Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron Sports Report for Wednesday, November 18th. It's Thursday football preview on today's show. We're down to two games now. Utah State, Wyoming was canceled due to COVID-19 concerns earlier today, so we are now down to just one game in NFL and college football on Thursday. Tulsa, Tulane is still taking place. We'll preview that game. And, of course, the big Thursday night football game in the NFL, Arizona, Seattle. They played a classic just a few weeks ago that went to overtime. If we get anything close to as good this time around, it should be a good one on Thursday night. So we'll preview those games. First, though, we'll look back on last night's two MAC games in college football. That's all there was. The only tickets in town, I guess you could say, the two MAC games. And if you're Akron, it shows you how much work you've still got to do to rebuild this program. You score 35 points. You're almost getting 4 touchdowns as underdogs, 27 points as dogs, plus 27 they were in that game, and you still don't cover in spite of the fact you scored 35 points. They lose 69-35 to Kent State. It was an onslaught for the Kent State offense. Dustin Crum and the Golden Flashes offense just went up and down the field. They didn't have a single punt in the game against the Akron defense. Game flies way over the total as well. The other game was Buffalo Bowling Green, and Buffalo really making their backers upset by, quite frankly, taking their foot off the gas pedal in the fourth quarter. They were covering the number and leading by as much as 32, 35-3 they were up at one time, but they go to sleep in the fourth quarter. Bowling Green gets a couple of touchdowns, and Bowling Green ends up getting the point spread cover, but Buffalo still getting the comfortable straight-up win. Very, very close to the closing total. It really depended on when you bet it. You know, you could have still stayed under. You might have pushed with it landing on 59. And if you bet it when it fell all the way to 58, 58 and a half, you know, if you bet the over, then you would have cashed. So the late touchdown really putting that total in jeopardy. But Buffalo, a pretty good performance. I mean, I can excuse them for sort of letting up a little bit in the fourth quarter. They're still one of the top teams in the MAC. A very well-balanced team, good on defense. They can run and throw the football effectively on offense, and we saw that from Buffalo with the win last night against Bowling Green. All right, let's do the Thursday football preview. Let's start with the college game, Tulane and Tulsa. We've got Tulsa 6.5 point home favorites, 53.5 the total in this one. It's a real tough game for me. I'm not probably going to have a bet on it before the game starts. Tulsa's taken money, and I can understand why. I mean, Tulsa's been good. I mean, I'm in no rush to bet against Tulsa. I cashed with them multiple times last week. I had Tulsa money line against SMU before the game last week, and I was doing a live in-game betting show Saturday afternoon, and that game was ongoing as we were doing the show, and Tulsa ended up trailing 21-0 early in that game, and I jumped on Tulsa right then and there, live at plus 24.5 I got with Tulsa. I said, SMU is one of those teams that will let you back in the football game. They have struggled at times to put teams away, play a full 60 minutes. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Tulsa, an outstanding second half performance, dominant to come all the way back and pull off the comeback victory against the SMU Mustangs. The defense continues to be really strong. You know, this is an AAC conference where the defense in general, top to bottom, isn't great in this conference. There's only a couple of teams that play really good on the defensive side of the football. Cincinnati obviously is one, and Tulsa's probably another. And they were able to shut down Shane Buechele and the Mustangs offense in that second half, letting Zach Smith and the offense come back and get that victory. They got their act together offensively. But I don't want to undersell what the Tulane Green Wave have done in recent games. This is a Tulane team that's played some really good football themselves in the last few weeks. Obviously, they're at a bigger disadvantage here, traveling on a short week, playing on Thursday night. It's definitely not the easiest transition to make, but you look at Tulane, 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread in their last 3 games, winning decisively against Temple, blowing out East Carolina, blowing out Army last week. So it's a really good Tulane team playing good football. But the one concern I do have is they haven't played a lot of great defenses lately. The offense has put up a boatload of points. Houston, SMU, UCF, Temple, East Carolina, Army. Not a whole lot of great defenses in that group. Tulsa's going to be one of the good tests that they've had, for that freshman quarterback of Tulane, Michael Pratt, who's played pretty well. But now he's going to be going up against one of the best defenses he's played on the road on a short week. And I've seen enough, and Tulsa's been good enough to my bankroll this year, 4-1 against the spread for Tulsa to go along with that 4-1 straight up record. I just don't want to fade this team. The one issue that's holding me off laying the points, though, with Tulsa is the comeback win against SMU. Big time win for them. Is there a hangover? I'm to me seeing not so much the hangover effect. You're looking for these teams to maybe be flat after a big win. At Notre Dame, they weren't flat after a big win last week, or the last game they played against Boston College following the win against Clemson. Florida wasn't flat after beating Georgia. All they did was went out and roll up, 50 some points against Arkansas last week. I don't love buying into we're going to bet Tulane here because Tulsa's hungover. I'm not doing that. It's still a lean for me to Tulsa here, laying the points. I think they're they're certainly the better defense. And yeah, you might be banking on the fact that Tulsa, after the huge comeback win against SMU, maybe isn't focused here, but we haven't been seeing examples of teams coming in flat after the big win. And if Tulsa's not flat and they are locked in and they are focused on this opponent here, they're probably better than this opponent. So it's a lean for me to Tulsa, but it's a game I don't expect to bet. Arizona, Seattle, Thursday night football, NFL action. Seattle 3-point home favorites, 57.5 the total. And for Russell Wilson, when's the last time he and the Seattle team have lost 3 in a row? That obviously could happen here if they lose to the Arizona Cardinals. Look, the defense all year for Seattle has been bad. The secondary in particular, many quarterbacks they've played have been able to throw the ball at will against them. I mean, their defensive numbers have just been absolutely disastrous this season, particularly in terms of the pass defense. You look at the Seattle pass defense, they're giving up 353 yards per game through the air, 7.9 yards per pass. And if you've been, last few weeks, you've been betting Josh Allen when of the Bills, when they played Seattle, and you played Jared Goff of the Rams last week. If you bet them over their passing yards, these opposing quarterbacks of this Seattle team, you're doing quite well. And you better believe I'm looking at Kyler Murray over his passing yards here in this game because this Seattle secondary is just getting chewed up and spit out. They can't stop anything through the air right now. And that's an issue because you've got another very good, very talented quarterback rolling in to face you here, and Kyler Murray off the incredible comeback win against Buffalo, the Hail Murray, as I like to call it, to DeAndre Hopkins to win that game against the Buffalo Bills. Again, we talked about it with Tulsa, hangover. Will there be one? Could say the same about Arizona. I mean, that was a win that usually it's not easy to come back and play well, especially on a short week with travel, off the kind of just miraculous, scintillating victory that the Arizona Cardinals had on Sunday with the Hail Murray touchdown pass to beat the Buffalo Bills. This is not an easy turnaround for the Arizona Cardinals, but it's a division game. It's a chance to get closer to Seattle in the standings. And Cliff Kingsbury and a lot of the players all week have been talking about focusing on this game and that they think they will be ready. They are focused. They want to go into Seattle, prove a point, and win 2 in a row against the Seahawks. However, that's going to be easier said than done. Seattle's in a spot now where, he's still got a tremendous record off a straight up loss. I mentioned it. Even after the loss to the Rams on Sunday, the Seahawks are still 30-15 against the spread since 2010 off a loss. Russell Wilson, 20-13, or 23-11, I should say, Russell Wilson against the spread after a loss in his last 34 games off a loss. He's 23-11 ATS. This is definitely a spot advantage for Seattle, a team that's lost 2 in a row. I'm waiting for Jamal Adams to give this secondary a lift, a boost. I haven't seen it yet in the few games he's been back for the Seahawks to try to get some kind of better play out of this secondary. They can't run the football. You can't really run the football a ton against Seattle. That's been the one good news. Their secondary is where they're getting hurt, but their run defense has only given up 95 yards per game on the ground, 3.7 yards per carry. All the damage against this Seattle defense has been through the air, which means we're probably going to see more passing plays for Arizona. From a Seattle standpoint, the running back group is still a little bit banged up. The Arizona secondary still has a bunch of key injuries at cornerback. The Bills were able to pick that secondary apart last week, even though Arizona had to come back and win. And all those secondary injuries, they've been in play now for Arizona for a few weeks. And I think it's a big reason why they've cashed 3 overs in a row, the Cardinals. 37-34 when they last played Seattle. 71 points, game that went to overtime a few weeks ago. 34-31 against Miami, 65 points. That game goes over the total for Arizona. The Buffalo game last week, 32-30, 62 points. The game goes over the total. That's exactly where I'm looking in terms of this game from a betting perspective. Over 57.5 is definitely something that makes sense to me. Russell Wilson's had interception problems lately. We do have to point that out. He had 3 turnovers last week against the Rams. He had 2 the week before against Buffalo. He's not been right. He's not been the Russell Wilson we've come to expect the last couple games. But I think he's going to be better here. They're finally back home. He's played extremely good football here at home all season long. There are issues with Seattle. Maybe this team has been exposed as the good but not great team that their phony records sort of propped them up to look like prior to these last 2 games. But it just smells like a spot where you're going to get Seattle's best, and especially after losing in overtime to Arizona just a few weeks ago and coughing up a lead in that game as well. So I'm not stepping in front of Russell and Seattle here in this game. A lean for me to Seattle -3, although I'm not overly exuberant about it. More than anything, I do like the over here. You can get 57.5 as the prevailing number. 31-28 cashes your over here. And I think that's a very plausible final score to expect in this kind of game. Can you get both teams to 28? Think about that. You get both teams to 28, you're going to cash unless the game goes to overtime and nobody scores, which I highly doubt would happen. So as long as both teams get to 4 touchdowns, which I think is a very reasonable expectation and assumption here for this game, the game will go over the total. And that's where I'm most likely to attack this game from a betting standpoint on Thursday Night Football, as well as Kyler Murray's passing yards over. I mean, you just bet the quarterback facing this Seattle secondary, and you take that quarterback over passing yards. You've been doing quite well as of late. All right, that's your football preview for Thursday. And with that, that's going to be a wrap on the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report for Wednesday, November 18th. Thanks as always for tuning in. Appreciate you guys watching and the support. I'll be back with you tomorrow. On Thursday, we'll do the Friday football preview on the show tomorrow. And also Thursday tomorrow, which means Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, the live show, 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time, is back on the air, ready to preview NFL Week 11 on the show, every single game on the NFL board from a betting perspective. Tomorrow, 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday night, and I'll be back with you tomorrow on Thursday for another edition of the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports.